first time I heard the flames whisper my name, I thought it was only the wind chasing itself through the canyon. Emberwake Chasm has a way of bending sound, showing you reflections of noises that shouldn't exist, like echoes from another life. But when the whisper came again, my name, 3 syllables dragged like fingernails down a steel door, I knew the wind had nothing to do with it. The air around me tightened, warmed, then seemed to pulse with a living heartbeat. The ground beneath my boots radiated heat, as if some enormous creature were sleeping deep below, exhaling embers through the cracked stone. I should have turned around. I should have walked back up the narrow trail before the heat climbed into my bones and the whispers pressed against the inside of my skull. But I kept going. Some places draw you in even when every instinct screams at you to run. Some places taste your fear, savor it, and wait patiently for you to step just a little closer. Emberwake Chasm does not chase its victims. It simply waits for them to come of their own accord. And I was already halfway down the path when I realized I'd made a mistake I could never undo. The stories say that the flames in the chasm speak the truths people bury, that they take from the air the things you refuse to say aloud and shape them into voices you thought long dead. Most people chalk it up to superstition, or the desert heat bending sound waves until hallucinations bloom behind your eyes. I used to think the same. At least I pretended I did. But when your sins weigh on you like wet chains and the silence of night is filled not with rest, but with echoes you cannot silence, stories like these worm into your thoughts. They tap at the rafters of your mind, asking questions you refuse to answer. I didn't come here looking for absolution. I came here because something was following me. Even now I feel ridiculous thinking about it, because whatever stalked my dreams never showed itself in daylight. It remained just beyond my sight, looming at the edge of every room, every shadow. The feeling of being watched became constant, like the warmth of your own blood or the weight of your own arm. You forget it's there until suddenly it surges up, cold and heavy. I thought if I could find some place where the world grew strange and thin, like Emberwake, maybe the thing that clung to me would show its face. Or maybe I just needed to know whether I was losing my mind. The trail narrowed, then curved sharply, the canyon walls rising so high around me that the sky became a thin, trembling ribbon of blue. The rocks glowed like the embers in a dying fire, red, orange, streaks of black like soot. Smoke drifted upward from the vents that pocked the canyon floor, some thin as a hair, others wide enough to swallow a manhole. Their breath was hot, metallic. It smelled faintly of blood. It wasn't the first time I'd been near the chasm, but it was the first time I entered it alone. The whisper came again, closer now. Not my name this time, but something worse. A word no one alive should know but me. My knees buckled. I dropped to one hand, pressing my palm to the hot ground. A pulse traveled up my arm, and for one awful moment I felt as though something was reaching back, like the stone itself was alive. I pulled my hand away sharply, breath catching in my throat. No, I whispered to myself, shaking the tremor out of my fingers. Just the heat. Just the heat. But I knew I was lying. The ground had felt warm, yes, but not warm like rock. Warm like skin. Warm like something living. I forced myself upright and continued forward, though with every step I wondered whether I was walking toward answers or a grave. It wasn't long before the first voice spoke. It came from my left, where a cluster of vents glowed faintly beneath the sand, their rims pulsing with dull light. The voice rose with the smoke, thin, strained, like someone gasping through ruined lungs. I know what you did. I froze. The voice was not one I recognized. But the words pierced deeper than any knife. Who's there? I snapped, though the canyon swallowed my voice almost immediately. My shout ricocheted off the stone, returning to me softer, weaker. The voice did not answer. Instead, another joined it, this one behind me. You left him, the new voice said. You left him to die. My throat constricted. I spun around, scanning the canyon, but there was no one. Only the shimmering heat, the murmuring vents, the twisting smoke illuminated by faint scarlet glow. The voices weren't speaking from the vents. They were speaking through them, carried on the heat, fed by the fire. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but fear has never been a reliable guide for me. If anything, it only pushed me deeper. I kept walking, though my breath came quick and shallow. "I didn't leave him," I said through clenched teeth. "I tried." The canyon shuddered, a tremor so subtle it felt like the earth laughing. "You tried." "Nothing," a third voice hissed. This one was unmistakable. It was the voice of someone I knew too well, someone whose dying breath still echoed in my nightmares. I staggered back until my shoulders hit the canyon wall. My pulse hammered in my ears.
No, y whispered.
"That's not real. You're not real." The flames flickered. The vents exhaled. Smoke curled upward like fingers. "Real enough," the voice croaked. My vision blurred. Spots of light danced across my eyes. I reached for the canteen at my belt, but my fingers trembled so badly I couldn't unscrew the cap. I had not expected Emberwake to break me this quickly. I had imagined the descent would be gradual, that the voices would come slowly, like water rising around my ankles. But the chasm did not ease me into its hunger. It dragged me in by the throat. I forced myself to keep moving, if only to outrun the voices clawing at my ears. The canyon walls twisted and narrowed, funneling me toward a point where the air shimmered like heated glass. The heat grew unbearable. Sweat soaked through my shirt, turning the fabric into a second skin. My breath tasted like metal. Then, abruptly, the canyon widened. Before me stretched an open chamber carved by centuries of heat. It was enormous, like a cathedral hollowed out by flame. The walls were blackened, scorched. The ground was cracked, spiderwebs of glowing orange threading through the stone. In the center of the chamber lay a massive vent, easily 20 feet across, glowing brighter than any of the others. Flames licked its edges, whispering softly. They were too quiet to understand at first. Then they grew louder, clearer. They spoke my name, and then they spoke his. My vision tunneled. My breath hitched. Every muscle in my body locked. The sound of his name slicing through the heat-strained air was like a blade drawn slowly across old scars. The flames rose higher, twisting into faint shapes, almost faces, before dissolving into smoke. Their whispering turned into a low, rhythmic chant. I stepped closer, powerless to stop myself. This vent, I had read about it. The heart of Emberwake. The place where the guilty heard the things they feared most. Some said the vent held the souls of the condemned. Some said it held the truth of the world. Some said it was alive. "I didn't mean for him to die," I said softly, unable to tell whether I was speaking to the flames or to myself. "I didn't want any of it. You have to understand that." The chanting ceased. For a moment, there was only silence, thick, anticipatory, like the chasm was drawing breath. Then the flames roared upward. The voice that came was not a whisper. It was a bellow. "Liar." The force of the words slammed into me. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing on the cracked stone. The flames twisted violently, and for a heartbeat I saw a face within them. A face I had not seen in years, not since the night everything went wrong. The face contorted, mouths opening in agony, eyes hollow and accusing.
No, Ishuka.
"No, you're not. He's not." Another voice rose from the vent, then another, and another, a chorus of the dead, all speaking at once, all speaking to me. "You killed him. You abandoned him. You watched him die. You did nothing. You did nothing. You did nothing." I clamped my hands over my ears, but it did nothing. The voices were not entering through my ears. They were erupting inside my head. "Stop!" I shouted. "Please stop." The flames subsided suddenly, falling back into the vent like a living creature retreating into the dark. The voices cut off mid-sentence. The sudden silence was almost worse than the accusations. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking so violently I could barely keep them at my sides. I had come here for answers, but I had not expected Emberwake to rip open old wounds with such precision. The chasm knew me. It knew the parts of my past I refused to speak. It knew the truth I had buried so deeply even I could barely touch it. But the worst part, The part that made bile rise in my throat, that made my skin crawl, was that the chasm wasn't wrong. I had abandoned him. I had watched him die. I had done nothing. But there was more to the story. There was always more. Before I could gather my thoughts, another sound rose from the vent. Not a voice, not a whisper. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from the darkness within the fire. My blood ran cold. The flames lowered, shrinking until the vent was a pit of smoldering red. Then something climbed out. It moved with a grace that contradicted its size. Shadows flickered along the cavern walls as it emerged, but it was not a shadow. Not entirely. I could see the outline of a man, or what had been a man, rising from the embers. His skin glowed faintly, as if the fire had seeped into his veins. His eyes, I cannot describe them without trembling. They were hollow yet burning, black pits edged in red, staring through me as though they knew every sin I'd ever committed, every secret I had tried to hide from the world and from myself. My voice caught in my throat. Words failed me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to fall back into the narrow paths I had traversed. But my legs were rooted. I could not move. Why did you leave me? His voice was a rasping, tortured thing, rising from the chasm itself and from somewhere deep inside my chest at the same time. It was a sound I had dreamed of for years, one I had tried to forget. And yet, there it was, cutting through the air like molten steel. I didn't mean to. I began, but even the words sounded hollow, flimsy. Nothing could undo that night. Nothing could erase what I had done or what I had failed to do. The figure moved closer. Each step left smoldering footprints behind him, but the fire did not burn me. Instead, it felt like the heat was a part of him, part of some unholy presence that had grown in the cracks and vents of Emberwake Chasm. My mouth opened again, but no words came. "You know," he said, his voice rising and falling like the crackle of a bonfire, "I remember everything. Do you? Do you even remember what you promised me?" The memory hit me like a hammer. The promise I had whispered on a night heavy with fear, the vow that had tied us together, now severed by cowardice. I had promised him safety. I had promised him escape. I had promised him the light. And I had failed. My throat constricted. I stumbled back a step. My hand scraped along the canyon wall, leaving streaks of blood that instantly smoked as if cursed. I tried. I really tried. The fire around him surged. His face twisted into a mask of rage and grief. "Tried?" he shouted. "Tried? I died because you couldn't act. Because you were too afraid to move while I screamed for you. Do you hear me? I screamed for you." I fell to my knees. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, to flee, but I could not. Every fiber of my being was drawn to him. The fire wrapped around him like a cloak, and I realized the truth with a sickening chill. Emberwake Chasm did not merely speak of sins. It amplified them, fed on them, made them flesh. It had pulled him from the ashes of memory, recreated him from the weight of my guilt, and now he stood before me, more real than anything I had ever faced. I'm sorry," I whispered, and the words were almost swallowed by the roar of the vents. "Sorry doesn't bring me back," he said. His voice softened slightly, a whisper now, yet it cut deeper. "Do you understand? You let me die. You let me rot in the desert while the world moved on. And now you think that crawling into this cursed place absolves you." I shook my head frantically.
No.
"I didn't come here for absolution. I came here to see if I was going mad." He tilted his head. "And you are." The embered flames around him flared, and I felt my own shadow stretch, twist, and fuse with the heat rising from the ground. "You've always been mad, haven't you? The guilt, the fear, the lies you tell yourself to keep breathing. I am the only truth you have left." Something deep in my chest twisted. My mind reeled. Every memory I had carefully shelved was now clawing its way to the surface. Names, faces, screams. All the things I had hidden, all the moments I had buried to survive. And now they were alive. They were here. The first voice returned. whispering again from the vents around the chamber. Not a single word at first, just a sibilant, curling sound like smoke moving through pipes. Then it formed sentences. "Do you remember her?" the voice asked. "The one you left behind? The one who trusted you?" My stomach dropped. I did. I had. And I had never spoken her name aloud for fear of summoning the memory too sharply. Yet here it was, dragged from the depths of my mind by flames that smelled like ashen iron. I remember," I said, my voice barely audible over the hiss of the vents. "She died," the voice whispered, chilling my bones. "You could have saved her, and you didn't." I doubled over, hands clutching my head. The chamber seemed to pulse around me, the vents exhaling rhythmically, carrying the whispers of everyone I had ever failed, everyone I had hurt. I was drowning in their voices, their pain, their rage. The embered figure advanced again. His steps were deliberate, measured, each one echoing in my skull. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "Do you feel the weight of it? The truth of all your sins pressed against your chest, squeezing the breath from you?" "Yes," I choked. "I feel it. I feel it all." "Good," he said. The ember around him flared violently, filling the chamber with heat so intense I felt my skin blistering. "Because you are going to live with it, forever. Not just the memory of what you did, but the voice of everyone you silenced, everyone you abandoned. You are going to hear them, every night, every moment, until the end." I wanted to scream, but the voices swallowed me. Not just his voice. Every whisper from every vent, every crack in the canyon, every embered breath, every accusation I had ever avoided. And then, just when I thought I could take no more, the figure leaned closer, his face inches from mine, eyes glowing red and molten. "But you can still do one thing," he whispered. "You can remember. You can face them. You can step into the fire that you yourself fanned with cowardice and lies. Or you can run and let them haunt you forever." I looked down at the floor, cracked and glowing beneath my trembling hands. I could feel the heat rising. I could feel the embers tugging at my skin, my soul, my very being. And I understood, Emberwake Chasm did not merely punish. It demanded confession, not from anyone else, from me, from the core of myself. I drew in a shuddering breath. The air was thick with smoke and fire, voices rising like a choir of the damned. I felt the weight of every sin, every betrayal, every lie I had ever told pressing against my chest. I felt my body shake violently, trembling with the power of my own guilt. And yet, somehow, I stepped forward. The figure of him recoiled slightly as if surprised. "So," he said, voice low, almost a whisper now, "you choose to face it?" I nodded, though my voice was gone. My legs wobbled beneath me. I forced myself closer to the vent. The heat licked my face, but I did not flinch. The smoke curled around me, whispering names I had buried, deeds I had forgotten, mistakes I had long tried to ignore. Every step closer was agony, yet I could not stop. I reached the edge of the vent, toes brushing the glowing cracks, the heat nearly unbearable. And then I spoke. Not words aloud, but words that carried in my mind. Confession, truth, guilt, all of it. I let it flow from me, a torrent of memories and failures, sins and fears, naming each one aloud in the language of my own conscience. The chamber trembled. The walls of Emberwake groaned as if the canyon itself were responding. Flames roared, spiraling high, twisting into shapes and forms, faces and figures of those I had wronged. They did not attack. They did not accuse further. They watched. They listened. And slowly, the figure of him began to dissipate. Embered flesh turning back into smoke, eyes fading, until only a faint red glow lingered where he had been. The whispers did not vanish entirely. They would never vanish, but they quieted, softer now, like a tide receding just enough to catch my breath. I collapsed to the ground, the heat unbearable, sweat and tears mingling on my face. My chest burned from the effort, my mind reeling from the confessions, the truth, the enormity of what I had faced. I had come to Emberwake Chasm seeking answers. I had found a reckoning. And yet, even as I lay there, gasping, the vent pulsing beneath me, I knew one thing with certainty. I would return. Because Emberwake does not let you leave unchanged. And it does not forget. I did not sleep that night. Or at least, I cannot tell if what passed for sleep was anything more than a fitful drift in and out of a haze where the heat of Emberwake clung to my skin like molten chains. The canyon did not fall silent. Even with the embered figure gone, the vents hissed and whispered. My name was called, sometimes in voices I recognized, sometimes in tones that felt alien and sharp as broken glass. Every sound pressed against my mind, tugging at memories I had long hidden, daring me to look, to remember, to confess again. By the time dawn crept over the canyon rim, the sky thin and pale above the towering walls, I had stumbled into a rhythm of walking and listening, as if pacing could contain the pressure in my skull. And yet, the more I moved, the more the voices followed, dancing in the smoke and embers, curling along the stone like living fingers. I began to see things in the walls themselves, faces, twisted and fleeting, formed in cracks and shadows. The fire seemed to mimic the shapes of those long gone. Friends, strangers, betrayals, mistakes. Every fragment of human experience I had buried. My eyes refused to look away. It was as if the canyon demanded attention, demanded acknowledgement of the truth, demanded that I confront everything I had run from. At first, I thought I might collapse into madness. Every step, every glance at a wall or event, returned to memory. The screams I ignored, the pleas I silenced, the lies I repeated to myself just to breathe another day. The air shimmered with heat, carrying whispers and layers, voices overlaying one another until I could not distinguish where one began or ended. The canyon had learned me, dissected me, catalogued my sins and stitched them into its very stone. I do not know how long I wandered. Hours, maybe days. Time became meaningless. The sun rose, then fell, then rose again. Smoke and heat twisted light into patterns that confused me. And yet I pressed forward, compelled by some mixture of fear and a need for absolution. I did not know what I sought anymore. Answers? Forgiveness? Or simply to survive long enough to leave the chasm? That is when I found the second vent. It was smaller than the heart of Emberwake, tucked into a curve of blackened rock, but its breath was thicker, hotter, almost alive. I approached cautiously. The voices rose immediately, a chorus that seemed to spring from every corner of my mind simultaneously. You thought the first was enough? They hissed. Do you think you can confess a little and walk away? The heat pressed against my chest. I staggered back. My skin sizzled where it had brushed against the glowing stone. And yet the pull was irresistible. Emberwake has a gravity that feeds on guilt, and I was its willing prey. I leaned closer, forcing my trembling hands to the rock. And then I saw it. Something in the vent, deeper than I could have imagined. Shapes moved within, fluid and writhing. Figures, shadows, not quite human, not quite flame. Faces screaming silently in endless loops of suffering. They seemed to know me, not just my past, but the hidden corners of my thoughts. One of the figures separated from the mass. A small child, though its eyes burned with the fury and sorrow of a lifetime. And in that moment I knew I had failed more than one. The whispers I had heard in the nights before arriving at the chasm, the dreams that clawed at my chest, they were not figments of imagination. They were memories calling me here. You ignored them, the child figure whispered. Its mouth moved, forming words that were at once both accusation and plea. You ignored them until it was too late. I didn't. I stammered, voice breaking. I couldn't. I tried to help. The figure shook its head. You tried too little, too late, and still you linger. You cannot leave your guilt behind. The chamber seemed to close in around me. The smoke thickened, twisting, curling, carrying voices of more than just the dead. Those I had hurt, those I had failed, those whose lives had ended because of hesitation, cowardice, ignorance, all pressed against my mind. Emberwake was no longer just a canyon. It had become a mirror, not a reflection of what I looked like, but a reflection of what I was inside. I sank to my knees, hands covering my ears. The whispers became screams. The smoke coiled around me, biting at my skin, filling my nostrils with the iron tang of blood. Faces swam in the heat. A woman's twisted in despair, a man's frozen in fear, a child's open-mouthed in silent terror. I saw myself in each of them. Every mistake I had made, every failure I had ignored, every cowardly retreat. It was all written in the flames. And then the chasm spoke in a single voice, deeper than the others, resonant like molten rock cracking beneath the weight of centuries. "Do you see now?" it said. "Do you see yourself?" "Yes," I whispered, barely audible. "I see. I see it all. I see me." "Then remember," the voice said. "Do not forget. Do not deny. Emberwake will not let you escape what you are." I trembled. My knees dug into the scorched earth. Every inhale felt like inhaling fire. Every exhale carried the echo of voices, the shadow of sins long past. And yet, amidst the horror, I felt a strange clarity. I had been hiding from myself for decades. Emberwake had ripped the veil away. I could not hide anymore. Not from this canyon. Not from the voices. Not from the truth. I rose unsteadily. The heat stung my eyes, sweat and tears mixing on my face. I walked forward, drawn to the vent like a moth to fire, knowing that within it, the greatest truths awaited. Each step left a mark, a small ember burning where my feet touched. The canyon was alive with them, living proof of my journey, my confession, my exposure. Then I saw the deepest part of Emberwake Chasm, a fissure in the rock, wide enough to disappear into darkness. Flames twisted around its edges, whispering in voices I could barely comprehend, each one sharper, clearer, more intimate than the last. And I understood, beyond that fissure lay the final truth. The thing Emberwake had been guiding me toward, testing me for, preparing me to face. I swallowed. My throat burned from the heat and the words unsaid, the guilt that weighed heavier than any stone. And I stepped into the darkness. The air changed. The heat intensified. The voices became singular, focusing on me, threading their whispers into one continuous, unbearable pressure. Every memory, every failure, every life I had touched and broken. It coalesced into a single point of unbearable intensity. I fell forward, hands scraping the ground, heat searing my palms. The fissure seemed endless, black as nothing, yet molten edges licked at me, guiding me deeper. And then I saw it. Not a person, not a figure, but a wall of fire, a river of molten memory, glowing red, alive, humming with voices that were mine and not mine, past and present, real and imagined. Emberwake had prepared this for me, my sins made manifest, and in that fire I saw him again, the first figure I had met, the one I thought had been destroyed by my confession. He was there, yet multiplied, every failure I had inflicted upon him repeated infinitely in the flames. "You must choose," a voice hissed from the heat. "Not the figure. Not me. Something older, greater, infinite. Face it, consume it, or be consumed." My hands shook. My breath came in ragged gasps. I wanted to flee. My instincts screamed to retreat, to deny, to hide. But I could not. Emberwake had brought me here, and somewhere deep inside, I understood that fleeing was impossible. Not physically, not mentally, not ever. I stepped forward, into the wall of flames, and the fire spoke. The flames were not what I expected. They didn't burn, at least not in the way I thought they would. Instead of scorching my flesh, they tasted me, as though they were testing me, feeling for the edges of who I was and what I had done. Each flame, each flicker, seemed to crawl through my skin, burrow into my bones. It wasn't heat that seared me. It was guilt. The fire twisted around me, coiling like serpents, whispering my sins. At first, it was indistinct, like a whisper carried on the wind, quiet and fleeting. But soon it grew louder, sharper. more personal. Do you remember the night she begged you to help? A voice, barely a whisper, hissed from the flames. She pleaded, and you turned away. My body trembled, and I closed my eyes, but I could not escape. The voice was inside me. It was the voice of that night, the one I had tried to forget, the one I had buried so deep it almost didn't exist. But it was here, pressing on my chest, tightening around my lungs. I could feel her, trapped in the fire, her eyes wide with terror, her hands reaching for me as I stood frozen, too afraid to act. She died because of you. I wanted to scream, to tear at my skin, to tear myself apart. But I stood there, trembling, my heart pounding in my ears, too overwhelmed to do anything but listen. The fire pulsed, and every flame flickered with the faces of people I had failed. I saw him again, him, the one who had died because of my cowardice. He stood before me, his eyes empty, his body a distorted shape, flickering like a flame, an echo of what had once been. He smiled, but it wasn't a smile of recognition. It was a smile of accusation. You should have saved me, he said, his voice deep and hollow. But you didn't. You left me to burn. My throat tightened. The weight of the words, the weight of everything I had left unsaid, suffocated me. The fire knew me, knew my every sin, every lie, every failure. There was no escaping it. I stumbled backward, my hands pressing against the walls of the chasm. But the stone was hot, alive with the pulse of embered fire. It seared my palms and I recoiled, but the fire was everywhere now. Around me, inside me, pulling me deeper. Run, the voice said. It wasn't the fire this time, but something more insidious, something older. The air grew thick with heat, and the walls of the chasm seemed to close in. Run before it's too late. I turned, my legs moving faster than I ever thought possible, my heart hammering in my chest. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and I ran, stumbling over jagged stones. But no matter how fast I went, the heat pressed against me. The whispers clung to my skin like fire itself. The chasm twisted, bending in impossible angles. I was lost utterly and completely. The paths I thought I knew no longer made sense. The air shimmered with smoke, the sky above now a dark crimson, and the ground beneath my feet trembled. And then I heard it, a voice that wasn't mine. Why are you running? I stopped dead in my tracks. The voice, it was a reflection of my own. But there was something wrong with it, something cold and mocking. I turned, expecting to see the twisted form of the embered figure. But instead, there was only a shadow, a shape standing just beyond the light of the flames. The voice spoke again, slow and deliberate, each word sinking into me like ice. Why are you running from yourself? The shadow moved closer, and I felt a chill run down my spine, as if the temperature of the chasm itself had dropped. But it wasn't the cold that terrified me. It was the realization that I knew this voice, knew it more intimately than anything else in the world. It was mine, but not mine. The figure stepped into the faint light. His face was me but not me, a reflection of my worst self, the one that I had buried so deep that I couldn't even acknowledge it. His eyes were hollow, empty, dark pits that stared through me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. His smile was a twisted mockery of my own. Do you think you can escape this place? He sneered. You've already been here. You've always been here. Every decision, every sin, every regret has brought you to Emberwake. And now, he grinned, his voice a rasping hiss. Now you are me. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs felt like stone, weighed down by something heavier than fear. Yes, he said, stepping closer. You are the one who abandoned him. You are the one who stood by while she died. You are the one who couldn't save anyone. And now you're trapped here, just like me. The fire flared, casting his shadow on the walls of the chasm, stretching long and ominous. I backed away, but the shadow followed me, each step slow, deliberate. The fire crackled behind him like a living thing, as if the flames themselves were aware of the weight of his words. "You can't outrun yourself," he said. "You can't outrun this." I staggered back again, my eyes wide.
No.
"I'm not like you. I'm not like him." The reflection's smile widened, teeth gleaming like shards of broken glass. "But you are. You always have been. You let him die. You let her die. And you've been running ever since. Running from the truth. Running from your own soul." "No," I choked, my hands shaking. "I didn't. You did." His voice cut through me, piercing every defense I had built. "You chose. Every time. You chose to walk away. You chose to stay silent. And now the fire has caught up to you." My pulse quickened, blood pounding in my ears. I turned, desperate to find some way out, some way to escape the truth that he had just spoken. I wanted to scream, but no sound left my mouth. The walls of the chasm seemed to collapse in on me, closing in with every breath, every step. The fire roared louder, filling every corner, every shadow. "I'm not you," I whispered, but the words felt hollow, empty. The reflection laughed, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate the very air around me.
No.
"You're worse, because you know. You know exactly who you are, what you've done." He stepped closer, his face now inches from mine. His breath was like ash, burning my skin. "You are not trapped here, not by the fire. You're trapped by yourself, by what you've done. And that is the true prison, the one you've built inside your head." The flames around us flickered, their intensity growing. The smoke thickened, blurring my vision. And for a moment, I thought I could hear him, the real him, his voice calling to me from the past. But it wasn't just his voice. It was every voice, every whisper, every scream, every regret. "You cannot escape it," the reflection said softly, his voice like ice, chilling my blood. "You'll burn with it. In here, you'll never be free." I closed my eyes, my breath shaky, my body trembling. The heat pressed against me, suffocating. Couldn't run, couldn't hide. The fire, the voices, they were inside me now. The chasm had turned into my mind. Emberwake was no longer a place. It was who I was. And no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, I would always be here. I opened my eyes again, facing the reflection. His hollow eyes stared into mine, and for the first time I understood. It wasn't Emberwake that had brought me here. It was me. The fire surged one last time, reaching for me with fingers of flame, pulling me into the blackness. And I knew there was no escape. The flames were no longer fire. They had become something else, something deeper, something that didn't burn me but instead consumed me from the inside out. I felt the heat wrap around my ribs, curl like smoke into my lungs, settle into the marrow of my bones. It was not a physical fire. It was the fire of memory, the fire of guilt, of regret, of every unspoken truth, every unacknowledged failure. I was no longer standing in Emberwake, no longer in the chasm, no longer in the world of flesh and stone. I was inside myself. The reflection was gone, dissolved into the smoke, but its words echoed in my mind. "You can't outrun this." Couldn't. The fire swelled around me, pulling me down, pulling me deeper into the chasm of my own making. I could feel it in my chest. Every moment of hesitation, every lie, every time I failed to act when it mattered. They were all there, each one burning like an ember in my soul, feeding the flames. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I could hear her voice again, that pleading tone, and his, so full of accusation. "You should have saved me." The words tore through me. I was drowning in them. I closed my eyes, but the images didn't stop. Faces, moments, scenes played out in my mind's eye, every one of them stitched together with the thread of my guilt. I saw the woman I had left behind, her hand reaching out to me, her face contorted in pain. I saw him, the one who had died because I couldn't act in time, his eyes wide with unspoken words, with unheeded pleas. And I saw myself, not the person I wanted to be, not the person I pretended to be, but the real me, the one who couldn't save anyone, the one who ran from the hard choices, the one who stood by and watched it all burn. I stumbled, my knees buckling beneath me. The ground trembled beneath my feet, as if the chasm itself was breathing, shifting with the weight of my sins. The air thickened, the smoke choking, and I gasped for breath, but it tasted of ash, of fire. "Enough," I whispered, through clenched teeth. "Please, enough." But the fire didn't stop. It only grew. I stood there, engulfed, unable to move, my body trembling with the weight of everything I had ever done, or failed to do. The flames wrapped tighter, twisting through my body, pulling me apart with each passing second. Couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't escape. I was trapped in the very thing I had built inside myself. I thought I was going to die there. In that moment, I thought Emberwake had won, that it had consumed me completely. And in a way, it had. But then something happened. It wasn't an outside force. It wasn't some divine intervention or a voice calling from the dark. It was me. Somewhere, deep within the fire, I remembered something. It was buried under the weight of the guilt, the years of running, but it was there. A small spark, a faint glimmer of light. I had not abandoned everyone. There had been moments, small, fleeting moments when I had chosen to act, when I had chosen to be better, when I had stepped in even if it was too late. I remembered her face, the woman, the one I had failed. But there had been something I did. I had made her laugh, even when the world felt like it was closing in around us. I had tried. Not perfectly, not without flaw, but I had tried. And him, the one who died, I had been there at the end. I had been there, watching, horrified, helpless, but I had been there. I couldn't change what had happened, but I had been present. I had not walked away. And I realized then, through the fire and the smoke, that Emberwake hadn't come to destroy me. It had come to show me the truth of who I was. Not just the failure, but the moments of light buried beneath it all. The attempts I had made, however small. The effort to be someone who could be better. The fire didn't vanish, but it softened. The heat no longer pressed so fiercely on my skin. The voices became distant, softer, like echoes in a far-off hall. I felt the flames around me, but they no longer threatened to consume me. They were no longer an enemy. They were part of me. And that realization, that acceptance, it felt like a breath of air after drowning. The chasm shifted again. The walls of stone no longer pressed in on me. They opened, stretching wide, the smoke receding. I took a step forward, my body shaking, but I didn't stop. I wasn't running. I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I walked through the fire, through the haze, and for the first time since I entered Emberwake, I felt something that resembled peace. I stepped into the light. The world outside was different. The air was thin but cool. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the canyon in shades of gold and crimson. The smoke still swirled above the chasm, but the whispers had quieted. The fire still burned, but it was no longer the fire of destruction. It was the fire of remembrance, the fire of truth. I stood at the edge of Emberwake Chasm, looking out over the horizon, and for the first time, I understood something. There was no escape from myself, but there was a way forward. The canyon had shown me the full extent of my failures, yes, but it had also shown me the choice to move beyond them, to live with them, to face them and still find a way to walk forward. I didn't know where I was going or what awaited me beyond this moment, but I knew I couldn't stay here forever, lost in the flames of my guilt. And so, I turned away from Emberwake, from the voices, from the fire. I walked toward the horizon, toward the unknown, toward whatever came next, because I had faced my sins. And for the first time, I was ready to live with them,